Hello once again, internet family. What is up this fine day? Well, it finally happened. Proof that if the internet stamps its feet hard enough and shouts loud enough and throws enough of a tantrum, the Warner Brothers parents will give them exactly what they want. This is not what you would call responsible parenting. So if you haven't already guessed, I am talking today about the release of Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League, the Snyder Cut. But the question is it worth the hype? Is it worth the build-up? Is it worth all of the Snyder fans throwing their tantrums to finally get the 4-hour cut of what they wanted in the first place? Oh, let's get into it. So I'm going to go ahead and say right at the start, I am going to be talking about spoilers in this video because essentially this is a film that we already have. We released this film already. It was a few years ago. It was called Justice League. Yes, okay, I appreciate there was a lot of trouble in making that film. There was a lot of things that went wrong. Joss Whedon took over. It came out after some huge reshoots, some very dodgy mustache CGI, which, quite frankly, I'm grateful that I don't have to go through. And a whole whirlwind of press problems and people coming out of the woodwork saying that this wasn't the film that we were promised we were going to be making. Generally a little bit of a letdown. I will admit that I was let down by it. And I'm actually, you know, kind of a Joss Whedon fan. Recently so, not so much of him as a person, but hey, I grew up on the stuff that he made for the most part. So that's a part of my history that I can't just kind of take away now. Now when it came out that there was all of these hours of material that Zack Snyder had filmed for the Justice League that never got used, everyone was crying out, release the Snyder Cut! Let Zack Snyder make the film that he imagined making! Let him finish his project! It's his vision! Let him finish it! And it's like, okay, I appreciate that you want someone to finish the project that they initially started, that was their vision from the beginning. That's perfectly fine. But the level of the outcry that happened about it just baffles the mind. Fast forward to March 2021 after a global pandemic hit, and there's enough time to sit down and re-edit it and finish the project after some major reshoots and getting rid of literally everything that Joss Whedon touched on the original version. We now have the whole 4-hour cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League released strangely for free on HBO Max and in the UK on Sky Cinema, Now TV, wherever you can basically watch it. Now I will admit, I went into viewing this film very skeptically minded. I was of the mindset that A, 4 hours is a huge amount of time for a film of this kind of caliber. What is in there that needs to be 4 hours long for it to get the story across to you when half of the characters that it's focusing on are characters we already know about, and the other half are ones that we've kind of mostly already seen in films already. We don't necessarily need backstories for them at this point in time. But I appreciate this was re-edited under the imagination of this is what it would have been like had it been released originally. In which case, the studio probably still would have asked him to shave some time off of it, so they're not releasing a 4-hour film in cinemas. At least not without an intermission in the middle. The second reason I was skeptical was because, for all intents and purposes, this is a film we already have. The plot line is still the same. He's not changed a whole lot about what happened in the film. The characters are still the same. The action is still the same. The storyline is still, for the most part, exactly the same. It's just, it looks different. And the third reason I was skeptical was because Zack Snyder, for all of the praise that he's got for building up the DC cinematic universe as it is at the moment, he's encountered a lot of stuff with his other films that he's done so far that people still haven't liked. So what's going to make Justice League any different? Now, with all of that in mind, when watching Justice League, I do have to say that the Zack Snyder's Justice League film is a beast of a whole different kind. Right from the start, you do get the sense that this is a very different film, tonally and visually, from the original Justice League that got released in cinemas. And those two things can really set a film apart. The tone and the visual aspect of the film are really what drives the feeling of a film forward. If something tonally doesn't feel like the Justice League and visually doesn't get across to you that it's like a Justice League movie, that whole aspect is going to go boom out the window. So yes, I do have to say, visually and tonally, this felt more like the Justice League, or at least a Justice League that is in keeping with the other films that we have experienced up to this point. Wonder Woman, Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, all very similar in their visual grading of the actual film. They had a very similar kind of hue to it all. I also really liked seeing a lot of the scenes that we were originally promised in the first teaser trailer. There's a lot of lines and scenes that got added in to the original release of Justice League that meant we didn't see some of the scenes that we got promised. We didn't see all of the Cyborg origins from before his accident. We didn't see a lot of Barry Allen as the Flash, other than him being the comic relief. Barry Allen is still kind of the comic relief in Zack Snyder's Justice League, but there is a whole lot more grounding and a whole lot more relevance to his character in this film that we didn't originally see. I like that there's a lot more context to some things that happen in the film. There were obviously scenes that got cut from the original theatrical release of Justice League that gave a lot more context to the decisions and the actions of the characters that without that context just seemed like they were doing it just because they could. Plus, also, anything that gives us a little bit more of J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon is perfectly fine in my books, I have to say. And now onto a little bit of spoiler territory. There were some inclusions in this film that obviously in an original theatrical release would have built up a lot more than they were planning to build up if they weren't planning on continuing with Zack Snyder's vision after this point. So things like the inclusion of Martian Manhunter, which I have read originally was going to be Green Lantern, and Warner Brothers really fought back against Zack Snyder including Green Lantern, which is like, why would you do that? Why would you fight back against including such an iconic character as Green Lantern, other than for the fact that Green Lantern is borderline as powerful as Superman? And to include them in this film would kind of be going, well, why haven't they stepped in already from the start? They obviously have further plans for Green Lantern, or at least did have at one point. So to include Martian Manhunter as a silent observer of what was happening makes a little bit more sense. The whole inclusion of the nightmare dream sequence, where it's the tragic future, I really don't know where all of this is going. Are these meant to be future echoes? Are these meant to be dream sequences? Are these meant to be actual visions that Batman is having somehow put into his mind? Are these genuinely flash forwards that we're having? And we're gradually piecing together the things that are gonna come up to that point. Who really knows? But obviously if Zack Snyder is releasing this version as his original vision of what was going to be released in cinemas, there was obviously a plan for this to be part of a wider thing, perhaps even a trilogy that was leading up to the point where the Justice League lost. On the one hand, I understand why they wanted to release it, because he's releasing this as the vision that he originally had to be released, and this was what we were supposed to be getting from the start. But it's also kind of teasing us at the same time with something that we know we're not actually gonna have. It's kind of like showing a hungry person a cake and going, yeah, you could have this, but I just wanted to show you what you could have. You're not actually gonna have this. But it's nice to look at, isn't it? And obviously in that nightmare scenario that could eventually happen, might not eventually happen now, there's the element that perhaps Superman has gone bad, which makes me wonder what universe they're setting this in. Earth Prime is based on the fact that Superman is good. So does Superman get corrupted? Does Superman have a vendetta? Basically, there are elements of Zack Snyder's Justice League that raise more questions than they actually answer. Which makes me wonder whether part of the reason that this got its release now is a means to an end of giving Zack Snyder more work for Warner Brothers, in the hopes that people will now go, give him the whole trilogy. We want to see so much more of this happen. We'll pay you money. And ultimately, I don't know if that is the plan for Warner Brothers now. Now, a few of the reasons that I was really glad that I watched this film. First of all, they got rid of a lot of the quippy kind of back and forths that characters have at certain points, which did feel very forced in at a few points and felt very Joss Whedon-y, which has its place in something like The Avengers for Marvel. That makes sense. But when watching Batman crack a joke after he's literally been thrown into a police car, that kind of didn't really sit right with me originally. I was like, Batman doesn't really make quips at these points. Batman is a man of action, not talk. So why are you making him talk so much at these points? And a lot got changed in the final action sequence. There was no massive sidetrack with Superman and the Flash to go and save people from the local surrounding area all of a sudden, out of nowhere, when everyone else is trying to focus on saving the rest of the world at the same time. So a lot of that really flows a lot better. There are no detractions, there's no sidetracks, there's no side missions at any point, which I actually think makes it a lot more laser focused in a final action scene, which is really what you want to have. And obviously, Steppenwolf looks so much better. He no longer looks like a badly rendered PlayStation 3 boss fight, which was my main issue in the original release of Justice League. Now, he looks much better. He looks actually quite scary, except for when he's got Furby eyes looking up to Darkseid like he's sorry. He's sorry. Come on! Steppenwolf's sorry. Look, he's paid his debt. Let him off. And his armor is no longer just kind of swirls and stuff. His armor actually looks like it has a mind of its own. It snaps things off. It readjusts. It looks cool. A lot of this film just looks a lot cooler now. Plus, there is a shot right at the end with Batman standing on the Bat Tank from Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, which I was really excited by, and all I could say for the whole time that was on the screen, I was just screaming, Bat Tank! Bat Tank! So now my neighbors think I'm crazy. Ultimately, Zack Snyder's Justice League is definitely worth watching to see what we would have originally got had he been able to finish his vision originally and release it in theaters. It does, however, raise a huge question for me, which is, are we now seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League as being a much, much better film because it's being compared to something inferior that we already got? And if this had been released originally without the first version of Justice League that got released in cinemas, would we still praise it as highly? Would it still be 4 hours long? I'm almost certain that the production company, Warner Brothers, would have made him cut bits out to condense it down. It probably would have ended up being more along the lines of an Avengers Endgame style 3 hours. So there's still a whole hour that might well have been cut for theatres and then released later on as an extended cut, like he did with Man of Steel, like he did with Batman v Superman. So we probably still would have ended up with this cut, but I don't think it would have been the one that got released in cinemas in the first place. Anyway, basically what I'm saying is, contextually speaking, do we like this film because we know what we already had, and this is now seeing what we should have had? Whereas, if this is what we originally had, would we have liked it as much? It's just, these are the things that keep me up at night. So with that in mind, and all of my questioning, Zack Snyder's Justice League does still get 4 stars from me. It was definitely a much better film. It was flowing a lot better, visually, tonally, it felt more like what we should have had from the start. And there were a lot of scenes in here that I did enjoy seeing more than I did the original Justice League. But again, I'm not sure whether this is just because I know what it was like before, and this, by comparison, feels like a much better film, or whether if this is what we had already had, this would still have the same rating. I'm really not sure. But these are the things that I guess we're just never gonna know. So, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? If you haven't seen it, what's put you off of seeing it? What was your favourite part of Zack Snyder's Justice League that might not have been in the original theatrical release that you liked seeing the most? All comments are welcome in the comments section below. Let's talk nerdy. Don't forget, we are still releasing our podcast Back to the Revuture, which is available on all podcast players. Go ahead, check out an episode or two. If you like it, subscribe on your favorite podcast player. Feel free to leave us a review as well. And if you've liked what you've seen here and you would like to see some more, you can click right here to subscribe and see some more funky, fresh videos from yours truly. And until that point, no matter what our divisive opinions of Zack Snyder's Justice League may be, I think it's safe to say that we can all unite in agreeing that Jared Leto's Joker is still pretty terrible. I was quite excited to see him get redeemed in the new sequence that was included in this film, and then he said to Batman that he was going to give him a reach around, and that ruined it for me. So, thanks, Jared Leto. You're still terrible.